Why is Bitcoin down today? Let's talk about it. First off, I don't really know because it doesn't really matter because nothing's wrong with Bitcoin. So every time the price changes, people start freaking out. They want to know, why is it down? Why is it up? Why is it down? Well, if you ever want to know, the best way to find out is to Google the word Bitcoin. And in the advanced search options, it lets you set it where you can say to show only the results from the last 24 hours or the last 7 days. So if the price changed in the last 24 hours and you want to know why, the easiest way to find out is to Google the word Bitcoin. And if the price changes in the last 24 hours, set the advanced search option to only show results in the last 24 hours. If the price changed in the last week, but not the last 24 hours, like you want to know why did it change, you know, 2 or 3 days ago, then set it to the last week rather than the last 24 hours. You can just read the news headlines, usually some combination of CoinDesk and what is it? Cointelegraph. Usually, the main news organizations that are going to tell you why it changed are Cointelegraph or CoinDesk. Although I think they switched to subscription, so I would not bother with that. It's not worth it. Or Routers, however you pronounce that, Routers. Sometimes you can get the Associated Press. Anyway, so there's a bunch of different things that you can read, and you just read the headlines of why it said things changed. So this morning, when Bitcoin was at 115 something thousand, I Googled the word Bitcoin. There was a few news stories about tens of thousands of Bitcoin being deposited to Galaxy, which is a trading platform. People hypothesized that it was going to be sold. There's other news stories about how Michael Saylor is raising $2.8 billion to buy Bitcoin. So, that should offset, whoever's selling. That's a lot of buying. But who knows? Who knows? The reason I say it doesn't matter is because once you own Bitcoin long enough, your average acquisition cost is far enough in the rearview mirror that it just doesn't matter. So, for example, my average acquisition cost for Bitcoin is in the ballpark of, I think, $35,000 is the sort of the best I can estimate is $35,000. So, at an average price of $35,000 with Bitcoin at 115, I'm living life at a radical discount. However much down 115,500 is compared to 35. What is that? That's like 70, I don't know. Let's call it 70% off. It's more, should be more than that, but whatever it is, 70% off. So I'm living life ballpark 70% off. Now, was I living life 71, 72, 73% off a few couple days ago? Yeah. At some point, if you're living life 70% off, 71, 72, 73, you're living life a lot off. It just doesn't matter that much if you're a few percentage points higher or lower. We were chilling for quite a few days at 118,000. So, that's great. And for a short period of time, we were above 120,000. And I was living life even more at a discount. Now, in the grand scheme, coin I've ever acquired, divided by, or one number divided by the other of all the money I've ever spent acquiring Bitcoin. The other way I look at it is I've talked about before that back in the fall of 2022, I bought 18 months of living expenses in Bitcoin, put them, uh, paired it to a Coinbase debit card, and I've been living for free on Bitcoin ever since because the price of Bitcoin is going up faster than I've been spending it. So I have been living for free, which is another way of looking at it. I've been living for free for the last 2.5 years. All of the end of 2022, plus all of 23, plus all of 24, and then the first half of 25. So more than 2.5 years I've been living for free. Um, Now, what happens when the price dips? Last time I checked, I went from 18 months of living expenses when I started this strategy to 3.5 years of living expenses. So when the price goes up to like $118,000, I end up at like 3.7 years of living expenses. When the price dips to $115,000, I dip to like 3.4 years of living expenses. But again, I started with 18 months of living expenses. So I've been living for free for 2.5 years, and I still have 3.5 years to go. So as the price of Bitcoin fluctuates, yeah, the amount of runway I have before that money theoretically runs out. Now, I don't actually think that money's ever going to run out because I think the price of Bitcoin for my entire life will continue to go up faster than I spend it with that Coinbase debit card. And if that is the case, then the runway will get longer and longer and longer, all the way through my natural life, um, which is what's happened so far. But in the meantime, yeah, that goes up and down. Sometimes I have a runway of, I can live for free at the current expense rate for 3.5 years. Sometimes it's 3.7. Then the price of Bitcoin changes, it changes to 3.4. Now, if you're thinking, yeah, that's nice for you, Joel, but what about for me, who just bought Bitcoin at 118,000 or 116,000 or 120,000 or even, 111,000? You know, these little dips are painful. Well, my answer to that is they're painful only because you're relatively new to Bitcoin. And over time, they will not be painful because you will be in the same position I'm in, where you're so far above your average purchase price that it just doesn't matter anymore. Also, I'll tell you, because people are always obsessing about why there's a dip or something like that. One second. And of course, dips always seem to happen right after people buy Bitcoin. Like, the day after someone buys Bitcoin, they always feel like it dips. Well, when something's going up and to the right, like this or like this, depending on, I don't know if Facebook mirrors the video or not. Whatever, up and to the right or up and to the right, whatever one's up and to the right, based on your perspective of my camera. Um, when something's going up and it's very choppy on the way up, that means almost nobody's doing it at the optimal perfect point when it dips. Someone is somewhere, but almost never it's the average person, which means no matter when you buy Bitcoin, it will almost always at some point be lower than your purchase price. And the only way to avoid that is, there's no way to avoid it because you don't know what low is. Like if somebody, came to me right now and said 15,500, should I buy it now? Is this the bottom of the dip? I would say there's a good chance it is, but it might not be. Nobody knows. Literally nobody in the world knows. And since nobody knows, you can either miss out on somewhere between 10x and 100x your money by not buying now, or you can just buy it now and not worry about it. Let me tell you why I like to buy it now and not worry about it. Because everything everyone is experiencing right now with the price of Bitcoin at 115 and then 118 and then it went up to 123 and now it's back at 115. Everything everyone's experiencing right now, I personally experienced myself when I first got into Bitcoin when the prices all had a zero removed. Okay, so here's what I mean by that. If you take a zero off the current price of Bitcoin, these were the prices I was initially buying a lot of the Bitcoin I owned back in 2017 and 2018. So people were always worried about. Now, again, if you knock the zeros off, 111 turns into 11,100, 115 turns into 11,000, et cetera. You just knock a zero off. Everyone was worried about, oh, but I just bought it at 11,800 and now it dipped to 11,500. And then it, might go down to 11,100 and oh no, and I bought it the wrong time and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Do you think anyone right now cares what price between 11,000 and 12,000 they bought? And remember, the percentage change between 11 and 12,000 is the exact percentage change between 110,000 and 120,000. You just knock a zero off. And everybody was obsessing and everybody was, worried about the exact price. I promise you, every single person, if you went to them right now and said, hey, do you just wish you had bought as much Bitcoin as you could at any price below $13,000? Everyone would say, I wish I had bought more Bitcoin below $13,000. It didn't matter if it was 9,000, 10,000, 11. It didn't matter if it was 11,100, 11,500, 11,800, the equivalent of where it was yesterday and the day before. 118,000 would turn into 11,800. It didn't matter if it's where it is today, which is the equivalent of 11,500, or it didn't matter if it dipped to 11,100, which is the equivalent of if it dips to 111,000. Everybody would buy as much Bitcoin as they can below $13,000 no matter what. The day will come when the same will be true of $130,000, when everybody will be laughing about how worried they were about whether they were buying Bitcoin at 115 or 118 or 111 or 121. Nobody will care. Everybody will just wish that they had bought as much Bitcoin as they possibly could below $130,000. Because when the price is 500,000 or $1 million per coin, 5 or 10 years from now, it will not make a lick of difference whether you paid 111 or 115 or 118 or 121. It's just not going to matter. I know you feel like it does. And because I felt like it did when there was a zero removed, and I did not have somebody here to tell me that, hey, it felt the same way when a zero was removed from that. And everybody was worried about whether they were buying Bitcoin at 1,000 or 1,100 or, whatever, 1,080, 1,000, 1,010, right? I mean, it's all the same stuff. Um, but nobody was here to tell me that it just didn't matter. And if they had been here, I would have bought more Bitcoin. So I'm telling you, in the long term, it doesn't matter. What matters is acquiring as much Bitcoin as you possibly can, holding on to it for as long as conceivably possible. And at some point, if you're in the same position I'm in, where you own enough Bitcoin that in my case, it represents 100% of my liquid assets. So I live off of my Bitcoin. Why do I live off of my Bitcoin? Because I don't have US dollars to live on. Uh, all the US dollars I get when my paycheck hits every 2 weeks are immediately converted to Bitcoin. And then I live off my Coinbase debit card. And then if I have major expenses, like my wife's grad school or something like that, I liquidate enough Bitcoin to cover whatever those expenses are at the last possible minute, allowing Bitcoin to appreciate as much as it can before it gets to that last possible minute. So anyway, that's the highlights. Same advice as always. Buy as much Bitcoin as you can. Hold on to it for as long as conceivably possible. And that is the formula that works. Hope all that helps. I'm here for anything you need. Send me questions. I'm always here. I love answering questions. I'm here to serve. Thanks, everyone.